Welcome to
Tired Teachers.
another one of our,
Who are you?
again, I'm Rumi. Hi.
And I'm Vinay.
We have another one of our talks, and this time we decide that we are going to talk about assessment.
Because we know that's one of everybody's favorite topics. So if you've been in education a minute or 10 million minutes, this is one of the things that we talk about all the time. Our favorite word, data.
Data.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about assessments. And let's just jump into it. So depending upon what you read, who you listen to, who you follow, there are either 3 kinds of assessments, or there's 7 kinds of assessments, or there's 6 kinds of assessments. It's sort of like science. This year we have this many planets, and next year we're going to have this many planets. So it's the same thing. It just depends on who you listen to, who you talk, what you read, and whatever your district decides are going to be the types of assessments. Yes. But we're mainly going to talk about the big 3, which kind of encompasses all of the other ones that people talk about. They kind of fit in one of these 3 categories. So we're going to talk about diagnostic assessments, we're going to talk about formative assessments, and we're going to talk about summative assessments. Now, let me just throw this in as my disclaimer. We're not going to get really, really deep into it because school is about to start if it hasn't already started for you, and you're going to hear enough of this at school. We just want to throw in our little piece of the pie. All right?
And because of the end of the day, it will depend of your district what kind of the big 3 assessments you're going to have, and in your school, in your campus, probably the admin team will decide what kind of other assessments you're going to have.
Right.
So we're just going to look at the big picture on this one.
Right. So I'm sure that when you're sitting in planning, if you've had your plannings or you've been in planning in the past, you've talked a lot about data. And a lot of times teachers are confused as to, okay, so you're handing me all of these test scores, or I'm looking on a computer at all of my test scores, but what does this data mean? So this is my opinion. I think when you have a clearer, not the clearest, but clearer understanding.
I'm not saying that word.
Clearer understanding of the types of diagnostics, you can decide what kind of assessment did I just give and what kind of data is it giving me.
Yes.
Because that's the only way that you can truly use the data to drive your classroom instruction. And that's what is expected of us, to look at this data and use it to drive our instruction. So in order to do that, I need to know what kind of data am I getting. Am I getting student against student data? Am I getting pre-assessment kind of data? What kind of data am I getting? So that's kind of what we want to talk about, what we're going to dwell on today. So let's just jump into the first one, is diagnostic assessment. So I'm just going to throw out a keyword, and then I'm going to let Rumi go from there. When you think diagnostic, or when you hear diagnostic type assessment, the keyword is pre.
Yes. It's before. It's where you start. And it's once again, it's not very clear exactly where your district is going to stand on that one. And in my case, my personal case, I usually do two of them. If the district has one that asks me to do, I'll do that one, but then I do one of mine, because it's exactly the way that Vinay said. The data is kind of not. If you look at the pre-assessment, and the pre-assessment will be beginning pre-assessing the knowledge for 5th grade, then you contrasting the group from last year with the one that you have here. Instead of going what they did in 4th grade, is it enough to start in 5th grade, for example? What they did in 1st grade, is it enough? Is it comparable to start on 2nd grade? So once again, it depends on which one you're going to use, but either way, this is your starting point. It's not going to be decisive. You just kind of look at the data of the results to figure out what is the basic level of your students to start that grade.
And it could be very specific to like one content area, or it could be very broad, like she said. I just want to know, if I throw out this in 5th grade math, let me see which content areas you already are clear with and which ones you're going to need more work with.
Yes.
Or I can just delve straight into, I want to know what you know about math, period. And I can give a pre-test. I can make it up myself, or I can use something that the district or the curriculum provides. Either way, I just want to know, what do you already know, or where are your weaknesses? So that's the purpose of a diagnostic test. Now, some examples, I've already said you can make up your own kind of pre-test. Does it have to be paper and pencil?
No.
It 100% doesn't have to be paper and pencil. You can come up with a Kahoot, you can come up with a Plicker, you can come up with any kind of Quizlet. Yeah, you can
Google Forms.
Any of those things. It can be any way that you want it. Now, would you necessarily take a grade on it?
No.
Not necessarily.
No.
You know, because it's just pre-information. It's just something to help you get started with whatever it is that you're about to do. Another example of what it could just simply be a discussion.
Yes.
You could call a student up and have a personal conference, throw some questions at them, have a conversation, and then, you can, if you have a little running record check sheet or something that you're going to use, you can just check it off as you're having your conversation with them, and it's as simple as that. Interview.
Yes.
It can be anything that you can use to get some pre-knowledge.
And I want to say very clearly on that one, whatever data you get on this, it's for you. It's not for the student to know. It's not for the kids to be exposed or whatever it is. This is information for the teacher. That's it. It's just for you to know where you're spending majority of the times with the individual kids. It will help you for your small groups.
Absolutely. Very, very good point. Especially now that the big push is towards guided math, guided reading, guided everything. And that basically means grouping, putting them in some sort of group and have them working in a group. So this is the perfect opportunity for you to get some information to help you formulate your groups. And I'm just throwing this in because it just popped into my head when we're talking about groups. Make sure that you understand that groups can be fluid. So I can do a pre-assessment for this specific topic, and then when I get to the next topic, do another pre-assessment and figure out, oh, well, this kid was in that group before, but now I need to move that one in and this one out, So your groups can be fluid, and those pre-assessments help you with those also. So again, the key word when you're talking about diagnostic tests is pre. Remember pre. And I guess that's not a word. It's a suffix. I'm sorry. Let me act like I know some language arts. Okay, it's a prefix. So the prefix that you need to remember is pre. So it's about, what is it, a KWL?
Yes.
What do you know? Okay. So then we move on to the next one, which would be formative assessment. Formative assessment. And your key word for formative assessment is process. Yes. Process. This is probably the most important type of assessment that you're going to use because it's going to affect what you do every single day.
Yes.
This is the most important one, and I think it's the one that people least understand. I don't even think I would probably argue that they use it, they just don't know they're using it. Because I think until I really had to
sign on that one.
I think until I had really read it and studied it for a minute, I was just like, oh, well, I do that.
Yes.
So I'm actually doing it. I just don't know that that's what I'm doing. And I think that's one of those things that they don't really explain to you in teacher college. You take the
Professional development.
You take the. I don't even think they really explained to you well in professional development. That's just my own personal opinion, because it took me many years to figure out. Oh, that's formative, and yes, I do that. I think any teacher worth their salt. If you're making adjustments every day to how you teach, then you're doing formal assessment.
Everybody's doing it.
Yeah, whether you're giving it a specific name, you're doing it. But we have to be more intentional when we're doing formal assessment, because it makes your classroom run smoother.
I mean, the formative assessment, it can be simple as an observation. And we are all doing it. We go around, we look at the student work, and where we fail majority of the time is to write down the observation. Okay, it kind of makes the record going. Once again, it's for you. But here is the other thing. It always takes place during instruction. It's always when you're teaching. It's always where something is happening in your classroom and they are learning something. And it's never graded.
It's true that it's never graded, but I'll even go a step further. She said that, we don't write it down. Sometimes we don't even pay attention to it, or we pay attention to it and we don't act upon it. Because sometimes you're going to have to make some adjustments on the fly. You're not going to be able to, let me write it down and I'll get back to that tomorrow. If 80% of your class has spaced out and they're all looking at you like deer in headlights, you have to make some immediate adjustments if you want to get them back. Otherwise, whatever it is that you've just taught, you're going to have to do it again tomorrow, because they're not going to have a clue. So sometimes, yes, you have time to make a mental note. I'll write that down. I'll readjust my lesson for tomorrow and do something different. But sometimes you're going to have to do it on the fly. You're going to have to stop whatever it is you're doing right then, make some kind of quick adjustment, and come back at them a different way. And I think sometimes we panic because we feel like I have to do it exactly like I have it on this lesson plan. I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that many times does not work. There you go back to the key word in education is flexibility. You have to be flexible enough to know your students well enough that when you look out in that little river of people and you see all eyes glaze over like a light bulb, and people start getting squirmy and they're not paying attention and stuff is going haywire, hey, maybe I need to change my delivery. I need to change the strategy that I'm using. And formative, I think, gives teachers the most angst because it's all about us.
It is about
It's
us.
more about us than it is about them,
Yes.
which is why it's not graded. Because this is...
You're not grading
it because you're grading yourself. And that causes us angst because we don't want to... I'm not going to say we don't want to. I'll say many of us haven't learned how to be reflective.
True. And sometimes you're straightforward confronted with that part of, because the kids will tell you they will be completely disconnected. It happens a lot with those very nice activities that you thought it's going to be the big deal, and you go in the classroom and the classroom is completely, the classes they're just not getting into, because the activity it's not mature enough to little kids, or it's too high for their understanding, or simply they're not interested in it. This is where it comes to you. Okay, so that did not work. Disregard, put to the side, and the flexibility kicks in. What do I do? What else do I have? How do I keep going forward? Because you still have to teach the concept.
Right. So that goes back to purposeful planning. Always have a backup plan.
Plan B.
If this doesn't work, have a backup plan. Because I guarantee you're going to have those moments when you look out there and they just don't get it.
Yes.
And you have to do something. And you're doing a disservice to both them and yourself if you just continue and not stop and make an adjustment. So for those of us, that work with the lower tiered students, we really have to pay attention to this.
Yes.
We really have to pay attention to this, because if they're already behind, I don't want to be the cause of them getting any further behind.
And it comes back to the part of differentiation, because if you're looking around, you're walking around and you're looking at what your kids are doing, and you see right there that one of your students or two of your students are struggling with that specific way of doing, the way that you taught them to do something, right there you need to stop and just for them adapt whatever you did, not for the whole class, but just for them. There is your differentiation for these specific kids, but it's just the observation. It's a formative, and it always will be for the teacher. It's not for the kids.
Absolutely. And ways that you can do it are all across the board. You know, there are just thousands of ways that you can do this kind of assessment. And like she said, the main one that we do all the time is just observe. You're just basically just looking, you're listening. You know, if you put some content out there and then 15 hands go up and the kids are asking the same questions or having the same misunderstanding like she was talking about, that's a formative assessment, and you have to do something about it. I can just walk up to various kids and have ask them a question. Just flat out ask questions. That's what your questions are for.
Yeah.
So that's why you need to make sure, and then this is going into another topic, but I'm going to throw it out there because it's on my head right now. When you ask your questions, make sure you're asking open-ended questions. You're not asking questions that they can just get away with saying yes or no or give you one word, because you can't really get any information from that. So if I ask it in a way that's open-ended, where they have to formulate a complete sentence or complete thought, that gives me more information than if they were just able to say no, yes, maybe. You get no data from that.
That's where the famous phrase of if they can explain to you, they know it. That's from where it comes, from the open-ended questions.
Yeah.
It can be the homework, because once again, the homework is an activity that you assigned, but they're doing it without you. And they're doing it without support or anything. So the homework can be part of your formative assessment.
It can be a journal entry.
Exactly. The conferences, that can be another one. We're doing it almost constantly, in the classroom. We just don't put a lot of attention of, I'm doing that. Oh, that's exactly what it is. It's a formative assessment.
Thumbs up, thumbs down. That's
4 corners.
4 corners. Those are all, if you have them put up a sign that says yes or no, or true or false, or something like that.
Yes.
Those are all examples of you doing formative assessment. But the key thing is, rather than just doing it because you think it's a cutesy thing to do, you have to be paying attention to what you're finding out by doing those things. Again, if half the class holds up a no when the answer is yes, then you need to do an adjustment and change what you're doing right there. So all of these things that we do all day long, as far as making sure, what we call it is checking for understanding. All these things that we do where we're checking for understanding or are considered formative assessments. And use that data, because it makes your life easier.
Absolutely.
When you pay attention to that, because I now know what I need to do.
Yeah, I used to, one of my favorites was the 4 corners. And what I did before that, obviously, when I had this kind of questions, and especially because in my field, it's usually the multiple answer questions, multiple choice questions. I will do the item analysis. So what is it in each one of the answers? What it says to me that the kids are missing. And then when they go to their corners, I will take pictures. Those are my great groups for the next day. Immediately, okay, if they miss that one or their answer is that one, I know what they're missing and how they're missing. And the only thing that you are asking the kids to do is walk to a corner. but you will have to have the item analysis before that, which is not a big deal to do. But
because most of your programs give you the analysis
yes,
anyway, unless it's a test that you created on your own.
mm-hmm.
So that's really, it's just a matter of just do it.
Yes, and it's not. I mean, I strongly believe that the formative assessment, it's more important for the teacher because first of all, it tells you where you are standing. Why is it what you doing it's not getting to everybody? Then it makes you adjust your way of teaching and your way of getting to the kids. But then when you adjust that part, it builds a relationship with the kids because there is no grade, there is no punishment, and then you are helping them because you adjusted your work and you're helping them. So that works very nicely to build relationship and trust in the classroom.
And this is another one of those situations where, again, we have to get over ourselves.
Yes.
Because this is about us. So, if you have 18 kids just looking at you like, what are you talking about?
Mm-hmm.
You can't take it personal.
No.
And you have to say to yourself, I have to do this a different way because they're not getting it. And even though this may be my favorite way to do it, I had this conversation with a teacher last year who was used to presenting some content a specific way. And up to this point, she said that all her classes up to this point loved doing it this way. But this year, it was not successful at all. In my head, I'm thinking, well, stop doing it and figure out something else that's going to cause them to be successful. But, again, the reflective piece was not there. And so, they continued along that path because that's what she liked. And she had been successful in the past. We've all had those moments, something that has been successful for 10 years. And then all of a sudden you get a group and it doesn't work at all. Well, that's on you to change your strategy. Sorry. Best practices, you have to change your strategy.
Yeah, and most probably that group that it's not getting it didn't get the basics in 2-3 levels before you. It doesn't matter. It's on you. And I'm going to go to the other side though, because it has happened to me. Straightforward. I'm doing it, I want to say nicely. Usually I try to change my strategies and practices, but whatever works. And you will have half of the group kind of getting it, that half of the group not getting it. So immediately with me, it's okay, if I don't know another way, or I can come up with another thing right there in the moment, in the place, I just kind of stop. And it's so easy as go to YouTube and watch videos about exactly the same topic. Somebody's doing something different that will tell you that. Or maybe it's that class of generation, and I'm not saying that it's kids, it's on the kids, but maybe you have this thing that you are catering more to the kids that learn listening to you and not the kids that learn more visually. Put it on the computer, and I have done that. It's the same thing, just put it on the program that I'm using, let the kids look over there, go back and forward, and it works. But once again, I want to say, it's for us. It's for us to figure out what we're doing either right or we're not doing correctly, but it's for us. It helps us to adjust to the needs of the kids.
Yeah, so when you're sitting in planning and you're talking about data, and that phrase comes up, that what are you doing to use this data to drive your instruction, that's basically what you need to be thinking about. All those observations and things that you do in your classroom so that you can check for understanding. What are you doing with that? And how are you tracking it to make sure that you're making adjustments? Because we can ask a question and okay, that many kids got it, and we don't do anything else. Exactly. We just move on. And I know time and pacing and calendars and everything you have to do, but this is the time for you to help yourself by looking at this data, this specific data, and letting it help you make your adjustments.
Yeah, tracking that data, it's important. Specifically, if you have in the classroom kids of tier 3 kids and special education kids, tracking why and when it's coming up will tell you how far behind you need to go to build the knowledge and how you have to pace that with that specific student. So tracking, that's what I was saying, that write it down. You need to find a way to track that. You can have, what's the one that we have on the phones now? Voice memo. Just make a voice memo and then you can have them put in folders or just make a little note. Make some kind of tracking of these data, it's important. I'm firm believer that you cannot have any kind of data without looking at the kids' work. You can give me a lot of numbers and I'm a person for the numbers, but without looking at the work of the kid, the number does not represent anything to me, but this is me. But yes, I do believe, even though it's a formative, even though it's for me to adjust, tracking the data of your formative assessment will be very interesting to see which kids you're reaching and which you're not.
And it covers you as to why you're doing what you're doing. It's covering you. True. So if you have to go to an RTI on a student, you have that data to back you up. If you have your SPED student and you have to go to an ARD, you have that information to back you up. But it's just gonna cover you, so you can justify why you're doing this versus this with any given student at any given day. All right, so let's move on to the next one. I hope that's enough. You think?
I think it is.
All right. The last one is summative assessments, and the key word for summative assessment is product.
Yes.
It's product. It's the finality of it all. It's the final product.
The final product
is product.
It's where you're assessing the final product of a process of building some kind of knowledge, a concrete knowledge. The product, it's the important part.
Yeah, it's basically the end. So all of the pre-assessments that you've done, all of the formative assessment that you've done, when you get to the end, you're looking for a product. The product may be a literal product, or it just may be you're going to give them this assessment and hopefully they've gotten all of the content correctly that you've given throughout that time period, and they have it, and that's the end of it, and we move on.
It always takes place after the learning has been completed.
Right.
Usually is the one that you actually get the number, and this is the one that it's not for the teacher. It measures the learning process of the students, and you're going to get it graded, not you. Okay, let's be clear on that one. If those are made by the teachers or the district, you will have to grade it. When it comes to state testing, they're graded, but you're not grading them. That's for new teachers.
Yeah. When I'm thinking about this type of test, know that it's unit test, it's your checkpoints, it's all of those things fall. Checkpoint can kind of go both ways, but checkpoints, your unit test, those kind of things, if you give them a project, if they have to have a completed portfolio, all those kind of things that they don't get to go back and do again. Now in elementary school, and I think it is this way everywhere, supposedly once you give that end of the unit or end of the year test, they're not supposed to be able to go back and do it. Because if you, when you read the research on it, if you allow them to go back, then it's turned into a formative assessment.
Yes.
Because they have some wiggle room in there. But you know how education is, it changes constantly. So, but just know that the end of the thing is your summative assessment. You do get grades for those. Generally, they don't get to redo it, but like I said, for us in elementary school, they can redo it and get a better grade. But it's the end, it's the product. Now, although we don't use this, so to speak, for self-reflection, it can be used for self-reflection.
Yes.
And it will probably be used as part of your evaluation as well.
Uh-huh.
And it's one of the fights that we're having across the country.
Yes.
About merit pay and that kind of thing. It's all based upon this. So if they're going to continue to try to base our monies and incentives and that kind of thing on these end of the year, end of the thing tests, then that's when formative assessments become even more important.
Yes.
Because you really want them, and again, not saying to teaching to the test, God forbid, but we want them to be prepared. All right? So, have anything else we want to throw out about testing?
I want to say that it depends of how the test is prepared, and this comes in the part of that it can be, even though you're measuring the student knowledge, it can be very reflective for the teacher, because if you prepared, that's why I like a standard test. Every time you finish the standard, you have a small quiz or whatever it is. Because if 80% of you kids are not passing the standard, it's not on them, it's on you. Mm-hmm. So you will have to go back, even though the grade is for them, but then 80% are not passed, even 50%. My things that if 60% is not getting it, I'm reteaching. Mm-hmm. Because it's something that I did, or I pace it too fast, or whatever it is, I have to reteach it. So even though it's a grade for the student, it's a reflective piece for me to see it. And my point has always been, I prefer a small chance. That's why I have a lot of small formative tests, summative tests. I'm a big fan of exit tickets on clickers. I just go around the classroom with my phone and I have it, and it can be one question or two questions, but by the next day I know where I have to redo the stuff, or which kids need more help, or which kids just need for me to slow down, and who is already moving forward. But for me, that graded on their knowledge, when it's made in a shorter term, it allows me to catch the mistakes before they become big ones.
Right. So I don't think we can do too much more on assessment than that. If you have a clear understanding, or a clearer understanding of what those three are, I believe, like I said from the beginning, that it will help you throughout your day as well as throughout the year to be reflective, help you decide upon your groups, help you decide on what are the best practices and what are not. And let me just throw this in there, when you're thinking about students that may not have gotten it, and she talks about reteaching. Reteach does not mean do the same strategy.
Oh no, never.
Don't do the same thing that you did before and expect that, oh, this is what I did the first time, just do that again, and that's a reteach. When you do a reteach, that means you're using different strategies. Different. You're doing it a different way. Your presentation is different. Maybe you did a whole group kind of thing the first time. Well, the next time, maybe you're going to do it all in a small group setting, or you're going to throw some technology in there, or you're going to figure out a different way to do it. You're not going to teach it the exact same way that you taught it the first time, because apparently that's the problem.
It did not work the first time. Why should it work the second?
It's not going to work the second time. So these are just some things that we felt like this is important, because I know I was confused about data for a long time. And then you go to planning and they hand you these big swaths of paper with all these numbers on it, and nobody
color
coded, yes, and we waste all this color ink. A lot of times, if you're a number person and you're into statistics like that, then you know, and you get excited over seeing all this data, that's one thing. But for those of us that are not the statisticians, and we're just looking at, okay, just 50%, that's a problem. I mean, that's where I'm going with the numbers. If you got a 50%, that's a problem. What do I need to do? What standard did you not get to allow you to cause you to get a 50%? That's what I need to know. All that other stuff is garbly-gump for me. I'm going to sit there and let her talk about it, and then I'm going to say, what standard do I need to go back and do and figure out some practices? But I think a lot of times we get overwhelmed with all this data because they push it down our, oh, I should have said that. It's that way. They give us all this nice data on these nice prepared
Just
papers.
say it.
And they tell you to do something with it. And you sit in planning. Oh, and I probably shouldn't put this out there either. But then you sit in your planning and, you know, you move the little cards from this way to that way. Who went up, who went down, da, 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 da. And you leave the room and what? So this, having this understanding of what these 3 different types of tests do, or what you're supposed to be getting from it, helps you to be able to go in and do your plans and run your class. You know, having that understanding. I wish I had had that understanding earlier in my career. Even though, you know, in teacher college, they made us take the data and assessment class, but it was so foreign and it was not, to me, in my opinion, well explained that I understood there are tests. I am taking them. I'm taking them now. I will have to take one to get a certificate.
Yes.
You know, I will be taking them continually throughout my career and throughout my life or whatever. But I didn't understand the differentiation between the data.
You know, as a person that actually loves data, I think the way that it's presented to us with that fear, you go in because, ooh, we always talk about the negative side of the data instead of looking at this is what was actually working, this is what you did good. Can you use this part to go and fix the ones that the parts that you couldn't do or the kids? So the kids did not do. So the part is we look at, oh, you missed this and they missed that and that. You're looking at the negative part, where data should be, this is what it's functioning, so how do I use this to fix this part? So that's very important. And I am the other thing that I don't like to be rushed with data, those big things there. Because what I do is I actually go down in the chunks and chunks and chunks, because they tell you, oh, they missed standard 5.4, for example. Which part of it? The adding, the subtracting, the comparison, which part of, maybe it was just a simple mistake of the kid that it did in this moment. So if I don't look specifically at what it is, you can tell me the standard, and we all know how our standards are done. Not a lot of words in there. You don't have to go and figure out what they're saying. But I mean, there's so much other things that are involved that you just tell me, oh, this is the data I'm doing, this is not. Yeah, no. That fear attached with data coming in with that, it's kind of very, very negative feeling for me, because it actually it's made to look at the other way. You look at the way that it's working. So this, your forte in that part will help you to deal with that.
And she just said something that I hadn't written down, but it just came into my head as she was talking. Make sure that whatever kind of assessment you have given, especially if it's a written assessment, and we're into gridables, you know, because it's convenient, and you can just throw it through the machine and let the machine grade it. And I get that for time purposes and for the convenience of it all. But at some point, you need to really sit down and look at what the student actually did, so that you can have a clearer understanding. Because like she said, if your district is like, or your state is like any other state, most of these standards have multiple things tied into one strand. So, you know, yeah, it may be 5.1, but 5.1 may have 3 different things in it. So when you're looking at their actual paper, how they actually did this problem, like she said, you might be able to see, oh, they got this part right and this part right, and they're only having issues with this.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make sense for you to waste your time on this whole standard again when it might be just one little thing you can fix quickly and move on.
Yes.
So that was a good point. Appreciate
It's
that.
one
That
of
was a
these
good
things.
point.
Yeah,
that's another way
Yeah.
to see data positively.
Yes,
rather than
exactly.
negatively.
And you
now it takes some more time
well,
that we don't have.
it will.
Depending upon how
yes.
many kids you have or classes you have, it could take more time. But to me, that's a necessary evil.
But usually we get the big data on the big tests, like benchmarks or checkpoints and the state. But that's why I was saying when you do your owns and the little ones, it's where you catch more. But it's the same thing because sometimes you will have a student, you're looking at the data and you already know this cannot be. If you don't look at the work and say, okay, the concept is there, the work is there, I know that this student knows oh, there we go. It's one miscalculation.
Yeah, they made it.
So it's not even a problem.
Yeah.
So
that'll save you some work and some.
Oh yes.
It'll save you some work and some.
But you have to look at once or twice.
Yeah.
You know, the big data sheets. But if you catch it in the little ones, if you catch it on time, then the big work it's not that much of. But as somebody that likes data and likes assessments, hey, I like data because I look at the data as the positive part of the data, not the color-coded things that we receive. I think that approach to data of fear, it's not good, okay, and so now what I'm doing. If you take the other approach, and every one of your assessments is like, okay, maybe they're just 3 questions, but they're targeting questions. And you look at the paper, and right there in this paper, you see, okay, there's no concept of regrouping. That's the one thing that I have to teach. Everything else, so the student figure it out, they figure out which ones go together, which ones go separately, what they're actually doing the work in there, but there is one missing of regrouping. If you teach just that one thing, you're done.
Right.
So data without looking at the student work will never work.
And that goes back to, we talked about this before, talked about rigor. It ties into rigor. Your assessment does not have to be 50 questions. It doesn't have to be 10 questions. It could be 2. But like she said, you have multiple concepts in one question, and you can figure out which of those concepts they don't get. And you don't have to spend a lot of time creating a lot or a long, drawn out test, which back in the day, back in the day, that was one of the things that we did, which is one of those things that drove us crazy, because we felt like you have to have a minimum of 20 problems or something like that for me to be able to really assess. Whereas now, I don't need 20 problems to see what it is that you know or don't know. It could be 3, like she said, and I can get all the information, the same information that I would have gotten on a 20 question quiz. So as you're thinking about your own individual assessments, remove that misconception from your head that it has to be some long drawn out thing when it doesn't, which is why you can have a conversation and get the same information.
Yeah. And it was very interesting because last year we had a unit test with just 5 questions. And that's the opposite. Oh, it's just one question. Yeah, but in the one question, if they know, if the knowledge is there, they will get it like this. Right. So you don't need even the unit one with 10 or 20. No, it has to be thought. You have to put the work on that, because I know the checkpoints, benchmarks, state tests, those will come from above us. But when you're doing your own tests, just think of, okay, I'm assessing just this part. So I need just this specific 3 questions for that, done and gone. You don't have to do 10 questions for one skill.
Yeah. So I think we're gonna end it right there. We're gonna stop right there because I think we could go on and on with this.
Oh yeah.
And run it into something else. So hopefully that has been helpful to you. And again, as we say all the time, send us your questions, give us your comments.
Please.
Drop it in the comment box, or you can email us directly.
Ideas.
Yeah, give us some ideas of some things that you might want us to speak about or not speak about. Either way, just go ahead and give us that information. We appreciate it. And subscribe to the channel and please share. And with that, we're going to sign off. This is Vinay and Rumi with 2 Tired Teachers, and we'll see you next time.
Next time.